available for download afterwards. I just started some minutes later to give more people time to attend the meeting or arrive in the meeting, but I think in the meanwhile everyone should be there. So we can go ahead. So hello again to the PoolParty Release 5.5 release webinar, the technical webinar. I guess some of you have already joined the webinar from Andreas Blumauer held yesterday, which was more from the business focus. And today we will try to focus more on the technical side of Release 5.5. The next major release we have for PoolParty. Also, the slides will be made available afterwards. Also, there are not many because I will mainly show things in the application itself. So let's start. I want to start first with some general changes in the application that I want to point out in the beginning. This will be especially also relevant for you when we upgrade the system, so you are aware of that. One major change we made with 5.5. This is also in relation to supporting Elasticsearch as an alternative to using Solr. We upgraded to Solr version 5.4.1. And that also means Solr is not the web application installed in the budget Tomcat anymore. It's a standalone service, so it's a server that will be installed with the PoolParty application. So the upgrade and the new installation will come with a built-in Solr service. But that also means, of course, that you can start or that you can connect your PoolParty, and I maybe even show you. Let me see if I can do that in my. So I'm also presenting on my local installation. So there's a slight change to the deployment, and you can configure in your setup that you are using an external Solr you might have in place. So that's the and of course here also you would configure to use an Elasticsearch server instead of Solr. So I would say that's one major change to the system itself. Also to mention it at the beginning, if you have questions, just put them in the question function in the webinar tool, and I'll try to answer them during the webinar. Of course, we can have we'll have a question and answering session at the end where I also will try to unmute you so you can ask directly. Okay, the second major change is that we did a refactoring of our named graph structure in PoolParty. So you may already know that different information in PoolParty is stored in different graphs. So workflow information, history information, the concept information itself. I will here point to the release notes where you have at the beginning the table that outlines the new graph naming in PoolParty that has been made consistent. So you see we have for each project 2 graphs with project information, meta information about your thesaurus. There's a void in the ADMS graph. The graph naming is based on the URI pattern you define for the project. So it follows again base URL project ID and then some identifier for the information you will get. Then you have the thesaurus data graphs like the thesaurus data itself, and then history, workflow, and all the others that might be in place. The information created for corpus management, so they're the candidate and disambiguation information, and finally also all the linked data graphs. So when you add DBPD as a source and you copy data, or when you add geonames as a source and you copy data, this data will also end up in separated named graphs to provide in the end, for example, in the linked data front and provenance, where does the data come from. And this graph naming has been refactored. That may affect queries you have. And of course, in our upgrade, this is handled automatically for all the projects on your server. So the transformation will be done automatically for you, but also, of course, that means that data from previous releases can be imported, but you have to migrate it. This is why we extended also our migration mechanism, allowing to select allowing to select single projects for migration. So this is a change of the data model itself. And the second thing we did in that respect is with 5.5, users in PoolParties have become resources. So previously, a user that is created in PoolParty has been, let's say, a literal that was a literal also in the metadata of the concept. We changed that with 5.5. Users have become resources. So when you create users also, they get a URI. We will have a look at the functionality later. And also in the metadata, these users will be resources that are connected to your concepts. When you think a bit beyond that, that of course offers much more functionality that can be based on that. And we will do things in that respect in the future, like monitoring better user behavior, suggestions based on user behavior. What we have now, and that brings me already to the next slide. Next, I want to show you functional side. Functionals, the main improvements that have been done. And from that perspective, what is in place already in 5.5 are user-based settings. But let's start first with 5.5. Again, we adapted the look and feel of PoolParty. So when you log in, you will see immediately that the UI changed. So the header looks different. On one hand, let's also open a project. The search bar moved to the top. The menus have been consolidated again and restructured a bit, mainly the right side menu has been removed or has been replaced. You have this user button here. Here you see already all groups assigned to that users. Here you have help and logout, which were menu entries before, and you can edit or go to the settings for this user and manage them. In addition, here you have an access to, let's say, external applications, so the links to the linked data front end, to the Sparkle endpoint, to the wiki front end, to the graph search if it is in place, to the visualization. Those links were before here. So they have been moved up in this, let's say, application box on top. And also the messages have been moved to a message box, only having an icon signaling by, in that case, everything is okay. Maybe later we'll see there may also be a warning when, for example, an extraction model is not up to date, or when something's wrong with snapshots. So you already see there's more information here. you will find several other UI improvements. So we think that again makes PoolParty much nicer and better usable. And I will just continue with the user management. And as mentioned, when you create users now, you have advanced tab where you specify the URL for the user. As in custom scheme and ontology management, this is customizable. So you can choose your own URI. You specify the base URL pattern as a server setting, as you do it for the base URL for projects and the base URL for ontologies and custom schemes. You don't have to specify the URI basically because normally you just enter the username and this will be what is used as a user identifier. So this would be the default URI generated if you don't want to have an individual one. As you see also, we can specify now the full name of the user. The rest here is the same. And when users are created, what we can do now is we can adapt additional settings for this user. On one hand, language settings, so you can define the interface language per user now. You can define which autocomplete language should be used per default. If this language, of course, is not in the project, we default to the default language of the project. And you can specify what languages should be displayed if you have a multilingual project. Again, this will default, of course, to the default language if none of these languages is present. And finally, you can manage the cost view. So if the advanced or the basic view is displayed to the user as a user setting. And of course, these settings are taken into account on every login. They are manageable, as you see, by the administrator. So this is another improvement that's done here. The administrator can change the password of other users. So if some of your users forget the password, you can create it for them again. And on the other hand, all the users have access to the settings. Of course, they cannot change the roles and groups if they are not super administrators, but they can change their own language settings and display settings, and they can, of course, change the password. And just to show the effect here, when we go to a concept in the history, we will see that now it's connected to the user as a resource. So I would say some major improvements to the whole user management, a lot of possibilities that we have here, and improved settings options for users. Yes, that will make working with the user management, I guess, much easier. So we covered the main UI changes. We covered user management. So next, I would like to show you the improvements we did to URI management. So we added in the intermediate release before already an additional option for providing identifiers for concepts. With 5.5, we go again a step beyond and introduced the ability to customize the URI settings for project to a very high degree. So this is all based also on requests and input from some customers. That means if you create a project, you still will define the base URI that is used for your project. And you specify the ID generation here. Nothing changed here. So for most cases, that should be sufficient, and all the resources you create here, independent concept schemes, collections, COSXL labels, everything will be based on that URI pattern. But if you want to change that, you can go to the advanced URI settings. And what you can do here is you can say, no, in my project, I want to have different UIs for concepts. They should be, again, have increment as a pattern. You want to have schemes using manual input. You want to have collections having manual input. And SCOSXL labels should be increment again. So you see this changed the URI. You see it here. It has changed based on the type of resource that is generated. So when we now make a concept scheme, we have to add the manual identifier. And if I now create something in here, it will use the concept in the increment. I maybe zoom in a bit so you can see it better. And that applies also, of course, to SCOSXL collections and SCOSXL labels. So that was basically the first improvement. You can specify different URI patterns based on the type of resource that you're creating. Second thing is we adapted or allow now to have different URI patterns per concept scheme. So for all the concepts created in the concept scheme. So here I have the default one. Maybe I even want to change that because I want to say this is URI management concepts places with increment. And here I want to have something different. Here I want to have URI management concepts regions, and again it should be from preferred label. I don't know. And now when I create here, let's say Europe as a resource, we will find that it adapts the pattern that we have per concept scheme. And if we create another resource here, like the Stephansdom in Vienna, it uses the pattern defined per concept scheme. And that, of course, gives us a lot of freedom in definition of URIs for your projects. You still can keep it very simple, but you have full ability to change the URI generation to a great degree. And the final thing is, I think that makes sense since we allow to add manual identifiers and you might mistype things and things like that. You can manually change URIs for your projects to adapt them. This is again only then available for administrators. Good. So Here, the question from Sean is, can you increment on a string? I'm not completely sure if I get the question. You mean that you have a string or a literal as a prefix, and then you add increment and have the prefix up front? If you mean that, no, that's not possible yet. We have just the increment on numbers, and in the definition, you can specify an offset, but you cannot combine prefixes with the increment. Okay. So next thing, and this is one of the real huge improvements or new features basically that we introduced in PoolParty 5.5, it's the import assistant. What does it mean? Previously in PoolParty, when you imported data, it was just imported as is, and then we had our quality mechanism where you could check for problems and adapt the data inside the project. Had advantage that you could just import without any checking. But of course, we know that there's data out that's not on one hand that valid. Or also we know that there are some specifics that data has to have to be displayed correctly in PoolParty, like there has to be a concept scheme and a top concept, and the concept scheme has to be labeled by DC terms. And so we decided to go for a different approach now, and that means that you have the ability. I will show that with the STV thesaurus, the thesaurus for economics, provided by the Leibniz Institute. That you can check the data on import, fix issues that you find in respect to issues in the data or not compatibility with PoolParty. So, and then you have a validated import that works in PoolParty directly. So I download it. I don't do this again from this page, the taxonomy. Here I can already point you to another improvement that has been done in course of the changing of the graph management and the changing to the import behavior. It's now possible to upload zip files, archives on import. So this is the file that you get when you download from the site from the Leibniz Institute. And you see there is the import assistant checkbox, which is checked by default. That also means you still can override this and disable the import assistant. And as before, the data will just be put in your project. So I run the import now, and you see I have the progress bar. The import assistance shows me what checks are currently done. Hierarchical consistency for larger thesauri, of course, might take a while. And then in the next stage, we will see after the checks have been done, we are presented with a list that shows us if all checks have been passed or if there are issues in the data. And also, we are provided with a repair mechanism. So you see, when I import the data, I find one issue. In the STV thesaurus, there is a concept that is also marked as all deprecated. in PoolParty, all deprecated is used for deleted concept, so it should not be a concept anymore. To avoid problems here, we can convert this. And this one is fixed. Then we have two resources where we have statements that have a resource as an object where we expect that it's a literal. So I remove that one, and this one is fine. And then finally, there is a domain and range conflict that has to be solved. And after I have done this, I can store the report data into my project. As you see here, when you import larger projects and you have many issues, this validation or this repair can take a while. There are some methods that just require no manual input, where we can just batch, upgrade or fix the data. There are others, for example, when we have missing empty labels, where you have to go through a list and add the labels. In that respect, we store this data temporary, and also you can only have on your server one import that is stored, and that means also you have per project, of course, that you have to have the ability to cancel the import or to export it and import it again in a later stage, so you don't lose work. But if you just work on it and you log out because you go for lunch or coffee and you log in again, of course the changes are not lost. So it's stored in a temporary store, and when you can recheck also after you're done. This is even recommended. To see, because it may also be that fixing one thing brings up another issue. But finally, when you're done, you can just store the report data into your project, and then it will show up correctly. So unfortunately, that doesn't react now. So maybe I just go to the next example. Not sure what happens here. Sorry for that. Yeah, just to continue. This feature of the import assistant has not only been applied to the RDF import, it's also available for the Excel import. And for the Excel import, yes, as you see, somehow I didn't manage to trigger the button on my trackpad on my laptop. Now it seems to work, and the data will be stored. It also applies to Excel import, and in the Excel import, it's a bit extended. It also verifies the data in your Excel sheet. So I will just create another project. Also, maybe to show you that. I have an Excel file here. And machine's a bit slow today. I just changed something here to produce some error, and this is power generation. So when I do an import of this Excel sheet now, you see also here the import assistant is in place and is active. So I import or trigger the import, and we will find that there is an error in our Excel sheet because there's an unknown column name. It's wrong according to the format we need to have. I change this again. And I can fix those. So if there are more issues, I will have a list of issues. I can fix the issues in the Excel file, and then I can start the import again. And after the file itself, the Excel itself is valid from the format, I will run through the import assistant for the RDF data and see if there are problems in the data itself. And then again, I can store the repaired data, but that does not seem to work on my local machine. So I will switch to our preview server. So you see also the storing part. Okay, so I import again this Excel. This doesn't take that long. And I store the repaired data. It will reload my project. And all the data is there. Good. So that is import assistant. So I think this import assistant is based on a, let's say, unit tool, testing tool for Sparkle. So it's basically mainly Sparkle-based quality checks that are done here for those interested on the technical side. And that means also that we will extend the set of rules that are checked based on the issues that we find. In this first phase, we implemented everything we are aware of, where we had problems with when customers imported data that didn't show up correctly. And of course, everything that is a constraint from the SCOS standard itself. But of course, this is also a mechanism we will apply in future releases to other kinds of data or data sets. So even custom schemes and ontologies can be validated that way. Another nice feature that is introduced in 5.5 is the terminology import. Terminology import was that. What does it mean? You have a multilingual project, and then there you can have again Excel files, one column per language, where you add your terms or your translations or terminologists working with it. And those files, they can upload with the terminology assistant. And what happens is those files are checked against the taxonomy or the thesaurus as a terminology base. So when I do this analysis, I will find one thing, I will find that Tesla Motors is a new thing that is not part of the taxonomy yet. So let's go back to, for example, hydropower, that I can show you other features that can be done that way. So let's say for hydropower, which is Wasserkraft, I removed that one. And then what do we also have in that file? Let's go to fuel cells and remove that one. So now we will get different results. I do the analysis again. So, and what we see now for bioenergy, we see, yes, bioenergy is there, and also the translation that we provided is the right one. It's again, we see Tesla is a new concept that has not been included, so I can say I put that below, let's say, fuel cells, and I create the new concept. And for fuel cells itself, I have a match, but Brennstoffzelle is not available as a translation, so I can add a translation as a preferred label. And for hydropower, I see that the preferred thing would be Wasserkraft, not Wasserenergie in German. So the if the translator checks the translation, he would find that he's using maybe the wrong word or not the word that should be used. On the other hand, he could add this as an alternative label. And this provides the functionality and to check your translations against your terminology or your thesaurus as a base, to bring in by that new concepts or add synonyms or even add preferred labels in newly translated languages, but of course also to check a list of translations against the term base and validate if it's correct. Can you advise us on a good automatic translator, API-based? No. This is not our business, basically. But using your taxonomy for translations is a good option. We have several clients that use PoolParty also for terminology management. And of course, it can also be used as dictionaries in translation management systems and things like that. And that way you could provide a domain-based translation service, basically. Okay, this was the terminology import assistant. So let's come to the next feature, which would be what we call context-aware data modeling. What do we mean by that? Basically, that means that with 5.5 in PoolParty, we added the ability to use this cos-in scheme property to add context to your concepts to the concepts in your concept schemes. So first of all, you see this is configurable. If you use cos-in scheme or not is depending on if you enable this setting. If it's disabled, it will just not be displayed. If it's enabled, you have in addition the in scheme for the concept scheme, and of course also for each concept itself. And now you can decide on how you want to manage in Scheme, and you can go add, of course, add it manually to all concepts in batch, remove of all concepts in batch, but you also can decide on enable adding in Scheme on concept creation and on relation changes. I did that in this other project, and that means here it's enabled for both. And that means also if I create a concept here, let's say I add Graz as another town in Austria, it's automatically in Scheme regions. And if I now add Graz also below cities as an error, it will automatically also get in Scheme places, because here it's inherited automatically on relation changes and on concept creation. But of course, as we see in this other project, we can handle it also context specific. So SCOS does not say that a concept in a hierarchy has to be part of the concept scheme. And this is what we modeled here, where Ireland is basically part of the British Islands, but not part of the European Union, because this is only the Republic of Ireland. We have here this after Brexit example we did. And you see grayed out means it's in the hierarchy, but it's not part of the scheme. So we see that also here. And here it's managed manually. And that way, of course, this information can be used to model very specific things, as you see. So you can treat it completely manually. We again allow to apply in Scheme as custom classes on subtrees. So I can set in Scheme, apply it on the subtree, remove it on the subtree. So you don't have to do it one by one. You can do it based on the tree. And finally, also, we have the possibility to use custom scheme relation based on custom classes. So based on a custom class, in scheme relations are added by reasoning. So as you see, this is a good this is a feature that brings you a lot of new options in the modeling of your taxonomy. May it only be that you want to have easier access to the information if a concept is in your concept scheme, or you want to model more complex context-aware information for your concepts, as we did it in this example. And finally, we have again added more abilities to the corpus management features. So with the last release, we already introduced co-occurrences based on terms. In the new release, we also calculate concept co-occurrences. So that especially applies to the candidate concepts that you create from the terms calculated. So, sorry, it takes a bit to load here. As said, this is my local machine. And you will see we have now not only a box with the term suggestions that are calculated for your taxonomy. We have also suggestions for concepts that may be relevant. And also now you can directly drag and drop from this thesaurus concept section into the relations section of your candidate concepts, and by that easier integrate the concepts into your taxonomy. There have been done several other things, improving the way how terms are generated, improving improving the way we extract text from extract terms from text to eliminate invalid terms that are created. And so that is strange now again. Sorry for that. Maybe I switch to the previous server. Because it takes very long to load. It's not typical. That helps you again to build up your taxonomies from corpora that you can calculate in here. So here we hopefully see, no, we have no suggestions here. So, I'm not lucky. There has been done a change, obviously, here. Yes, so, now we're done here. So you see, I get suggestions for terms, I get suggestions for concepts, I can directly relate those within here because these are mainly suggestions that will provide me related, narrow or broader concepts that I can directly add in here. And this is basically what we had already in place, where you can use suggested co-occurrent terms as synonyms. Okay, so these are the main features that have been added in this release. There are some smaller things I maybe want to point to. One is, we mentioned that already, the import-export, there were some changes. That also, the zip import we already saw. The opposite is the export. So when we export data now in a non-graph supporting format like Turtle, and we select to export more information, we will see that we get a zip file of that information, and that zip file contains then one file per graph that I export, and the naming includes where the data come from. And of course, if you import such archives, including files following this naming, so if you export one project that way and you import it again, then the data will be imported correctly in the correct context. And yes, again, this also applies to, you see, I have connected here MacLogic as a remote store to this machine. So when you don't do an export downloading the information, but rather storing that information to your remote graph database that you have connected. You see the format is deselected now because it's directly written to a graph in that store. And again, now not only the concept information is exported, I can, for example, export concepts and link data, and that will produce then on the graph store side. We can have even a look in my MacLogic server. I did some exports already. In one graph per information. So you see it was for another project I did the export, but there you see following the naming of that I showed you before that we use in the tool itself. We get here one graph per context that we export. Here it was the concept graph, the history, the workflow, and the deprecated concepts, which is, of course, again, useful when you want to provide the data in your graph database for usage there. Good. So I think these were the main features and things to show from the functional side. In the slides, there's the reference to the release notes. You might have seen them already anyway. There are some other things mentioned there that I maybe didn't cover. The next thing I wanted to show you is what happened on the API side. And I, again, will just show the highlights. So I showed already before that we added this terminology importer service. And we, in addition to that, of course, provide a service where you can do the same. So you even could use this terminology checking functionality programmatically and add it to one of your solutions. So I did basically the same. And I can send a post request to my machine, and I have the file here. Oh, it was not stored. So it has to be named file. And I choose this one. Okay. And I have to add the language. It's here. I send it. And I will get as a response, again, for this list, the information if there are labels to be added, if it's a new concept, and so on, and can treat it accordingly. So this is one new service that may be useful that has been introduced. Another one, completely independent from what I showed you till now, we added a getPath method. What does that mean? This functionality will provide me, I show it maybe in the application too. All the path of the concept up to the concept scheme level, also showing the hierarchy. So Vienna, as we see it, is in two places in the tree. One time it's below Austria in the regions part, and one time it's below cities in the places part. And this call I prepared here asks for the path of Vienna in this project. So I will send it, and we will see we get two paths. One is in the regions tree, and there we have the concept scheme and then the concept path with all the steps. So from Vienna, Austria, Western Europe, Europe. And the second one, which is in places, and the concept path is Vienna and cities. In that way, of course, you can build breadcrumbs or things like that for navigation purposes, or of course use it in other contexts. And next one to show is also we added the ability to get the draft concept of your taxonomy when you use workflows. That has not been in place yet, so you will just get all the concepts in status draft and see also the signy comments and things like that that may be useful. Small thing, not also a version check is added. And that are, I would say, the main changes we did from the API perspective for the source management API. Maybe also to mention it's not possible to add multi-concept suggest. The previous suggest service only allowed to have one suggest at a time. Now you can have multiple suggested concepts at a time. And of course, there are a lot of smaller improvements to different API methods that have been done. Secondly, Extractor Services. What has been done here is we introduced knowledge-based filtering of suggest service results. What does that mean? As you can see, we can add custom scheme information to filter results in suggest in the suggest service. Let's go back again to that example we have. So in here I have Vienna as a city and I have the Vienna giant wheel. If I now would do a suggest call, just give me a moment, I prepared it here somewhere. Here it is. So I do a suggest call. Without that extension, we would get, of course, when we search for concepts that include the string Vienna, we would get Vienna and Vienna the giant wheel. And what I modeled in this project is that on this part, I have a class site that is applied to the Vienna giant wheel. So when I filter now my results on that class, I only get the giant wheel as a result, because Vienna is not a concept with custom class site. Of course, also custom scheme relations or attributes can be used for filtering. So you could model different things, like you need an auto suggest that excludes concepts that should not be used or excuse terms that should not be used in specific applications. This is what was at the scenario that we used as a basis, as a use case for this implementation. Also, the expand service introduced in the last release. Expand service means that you can send a set of URIs or terms and define what you want to use for expansion. So you get back, in addition to the suggest service relations, broader and narrows down to some degree. And with the new release, as we see it now, we can also get custom properties back for this expand service. And this is intended to build up a search expansion in any search that is based on the taxonomy itself. And finally, also, since the corpus management abilities have been extended, this has been also added to the services. So you saw the co-currencies, the calculated co-currencies for concepts can be retrieved by API. And of course, also the co-current terms can be retrieved, and also services to retrieve blacklisted concepts and blacklisted terms have been added. Good. So that brings me to the last part. New integrations. What has happened on that side? As already mentioned before, PoolParty can now work on top of Elasticsearch too. That means Solr is replaced. And also for extraction and our graph search. If that is exchanged, Elasticsearch is used as an index. So we see here our graph search application that is now based on an Elasticsearch index. Functionality is basically the same as we had before. And you see that there's also then an admin interface showing what index is used. And in that case, it's a simple search. Also, of course, the search APIs are then working on top of Elasticsearch and on Solr. APIs are the same in both cases, work the same in both cases. The results are the same. Yes, I think that's all that can be said about that. So you can now choose which index you use in connection with PoolParty. And also, Elasticsearch version, at the beginning we stated Solr version 5.4.1. Elasticsearch it's 2.2.0. Then with 5.5 now also Stardog is supported, fully supported as a remote graph database that can be connected to PoolParty. So all the features that are in place, from the project export directly to the triple store as shown before, also the ontology and custom schema export is in place. Corpus management, if connected, is done in Stardog. And also the annotate and store method, so storing the results of extraction in Stardog is in place if the connection is done. And so there's a question. Are the changes to the existing API interface with the new 5.5 version, especially the extraction? No, there are no changes to existing APIs. So the results should stay the same. There may be additions in some APIs, but I'm not aware of any changes. So we try to keep it, of course, downwards compatible. So we may add new features. We may add new information in for some interfaces. So, for example, in the schema call, previously you could not retrieve the schema-related custom concept scheme-related data, that like the description and the subject of a concept scheme, that has been now added. But this should not affect a call that you did before, because the information itself has not changed. And normally this applies to all API changes that are done. They should not affect existing things. And basically all changes also are stated in the release notes, or should be stated in the release notes. Yeah, and finally, only to point it out again, I think if there's interest, we can have a quick look at it. Those who saw the webinar yesterday might have even seen something. We have a new integration with Microsoft SharePoint and Office 365, where automated tagging is done and an improved search is available in SharePoint. Yes, basically that's it from my side. Thank you for attending the webinar. Thank you for the questions and for listening. I will stay in the line for another, basically we have still some time left for questions, and maybe let's wait 5 minutes for people to drop out that don't want to stay for question and answering. And after that, I will just unmute the people staying in line and you can ask questions. Okay, thank you, bye.